CS12, welcome to Intermediate React Week. This week we're going to be going over sort of the ecosystem of React at large. So all of the main pieces that you need to know to kind of put together React application from scratch, essentially. And what's really cool about the week is that we get a chance to really dive in and really let last week's materials sink in this week as well. So in terms of what this week is going to look like, it's actually pretty light. We only have about 2 to 3 objectives to cover per day. So we get a chance to really spend time with those objectives and do a little bit of review here and there, light reviews, as well as, focus each day on a portion of a project that you're going to be building each day of the week. Okay? So these are the 4 things. Today we're going to be going over the tooling. Tomorrow, we're going to be going over the React lifecycle, the component lifecycle. Wednesday, we're going to be going over some compositional patterns. And then Thursday, we're going to be putting together some really cool libraries. Well, we're going to be utilizing some really cool libraries for styling within the JavaScript ecosystem. So this idea of CSS written in JavaScript, which is going to be really cool. If you loved less, you guys learn less. If you loved less, you will really, really love Thursday. If you're starting to love front-end development, HTML, CSS, JavaScript, React, you're really going to love Thursday. If you are just really not loving any of that stuff, you're still going to love Thursday a lot, okay? Because there's some really cool concepts that we go over. But this week is really all about what do I do to take a React application and build it from the ground up. So we're going to be learning about the ecosystem and architectural patterns, how we build out our component tree, how our directory tree looks like in our application and things like that. So those are things that we're really going to be focusing on. So today, that's pretty much what we're doing. We're going to be going over a couple of tools that allow us to gain a broader perspective of what React is. And then this afternoon, you're going to be working with those tools. You're also going to be working with the stuff that you learned last week. So it's all carryover. Okay? So the project, I mentioned you're going to be working on a 4-day project. Each afternoon, you're going to be building bits and pieces of it, okay? So the project is a clone of Instagram, okay? So it's going to look more or less like this when you're done with it, right? You're going to have multiple posts and things like that with a little search bar, okay? So this is what you're going to be building throughout the week. Every day you're going to be focusing on new pieces of this project, okay? So the first day is really just getting everything up and running and start building out your components. You'll find that each day has a new README, okay? So if you look, the first README that you get to for today, your focus are these tasks, okay? So you have these bullet points, and most of them are just set up and due process when it comes to getting your application up and running, okay? Then you'll see that there is a day 2 README. So Tuesday, you're going to have a focus and then a daily setup and how you get things up and running. And then you're going to have a description and then once again, tasks for day 2. So a few bullets that you focus on for that afternoon. Okay? Then it repeats itself. It does the same thing for day 3 where you go and you add these tasks. So each day you're going to be putting together a piece of the bigger picture. And then by the end of it all, what you're going to have is an application that you've built implementing the stuff that we learn each day as we go. Okay? So it's really, really fun. It's a really cool project. Now you're probably thinking to yourself, well, what happens if I don't get finished with day 1 tasks? Should I move on to day 2 tasks, right? And day 3 to day 4, etc. Okay, the idea is that we want you to focus on each piece each day, but we will let you know the day of, if you didn't finish the day before, how to best work with that afternoon. Okay, yeah, and it's amazing. You guys are going to really have a fun time with it. Okay, as far as where we're going this week, does anyone have any questions? Doesn't look like it. It looks like everyone's just eager to dive right in, and that's really good. Um, if you finish early, John, we will have another project we'll have a stretch assignment for the week. So if you finish, if you get all of the project done, and there's a lot of stretch problems each day that'll keep you focused. If you finish the daily stretch problems, move on to the next day. Okay, you can find tools and training kit, curriculum, and ideas that help you prepare for each day in training kit to move on to the next portion. So, but yeah, by the end of the week, I will have another stretch assignment for those that are really pushing themselves, akin to the sorting app, the sorting hat app. So if you had a chance to work on that, great. If you didn't, great as well. We're all here learning what we need to learn. Okay. So yeah, good question. All right, it doesn't look like we have any other questions, so we're just going to dive in and we're going to talk about the first item on our list, which is this really cool project that the Facebook team put together called Create React App. So out of curiosity, how many of y'all were able to work with Create React App over the weekend? I did ask your PMs to give you a pre-class video to watch over the weekend. Just curious, I'll just do a quick poll here. On this message, just click a fast parrot if you were able to watch it, and a red X if you weren't able to watch it, and get working with Create React App. Okay. Yeah, I did mention to your PMs and briefly on Thursday evening before I skipped town to give you that, but there's no harm, no foul if you didn't watch it. We're going to go over that exact thing right now. Okay. So Create React App. What are you? Okay, so initially, what the React ecosystem looked like was this really rough and rolling ecosystem. Anytime you wanted to jump into React App, oh, my screen has become nuts. Okay, I will fix. Let's do this and share again. Thank you. Anytime that happens, just let me know. Zoom does have its quirks. Okay. Okay, so yeah, originally the React ecosystem was really hard to get into. Really hard because it had a lot of moving parts. You used to have to basically either grab the CDN links, which weren't necessarily available all the way, and build a Webpack configuration that used Babel, right? The right presets and the right environment. And if one thing went wrong, then your whole entire tooling went wrong with it. So and here was the problem, is people were trying to learn React. They weren't trying to learn Webpack. They weren't trying to learn about Babel. They were simply trying to learn React.js and JSX and components and the architectural pattern of React and state and props. And in order to focus on those things, you had to first learn a technology that allowed you to work within the React ecosystem. So you had to go and you had to learn maybe Browserify, or you definitely had to learn all your NPM packages that you needed, your Webpack configuration, your plugins, your mix-ins, all of this stuff. And it caused this sort of eruption of what we call JavaScript tooling fatigue. So how many of you have heard that? Just by way of mention, again on this message, just hit the celebration emoji on this message in Slack. If you have heard of the term JavaScript tool fatigue, it is like there's 5,000 different Medium articles on the subject out there today. So that was the state, the condition of React when it first hit the scene and became very popular. But the idea was that you had to learn all of these things just to get everything up and running, okay? So during a hackathon, a few React core team members put together an experiment that was kind of based off of a few open source projects where you could go in and download what's called a command line interface, like you did with Less when you would run your Less commands in the command line. And basically what it would do is go and boilerplate or put together a bare bones, bare minimum React application for you by just running a command in the command line. Okay, and that application became Create React App. And the cool thing about Create React App is that it gave developers the opportunity to jump into React without having to worry about it learning any of the nitty-gritty, the stuff that you don't need to know to learn React, right? This may be stuff that you need to know later on, but you'll have somebody at your day job teach you, which is why we don't focus on teaching you Webpack or any of those other configuration tools, because you don't need to know those things to get into React anymore. The ecosystem has evolved. Okay, so the idea here is that we have from the Facebook React team the ability to use a command line interface that will go and build out a React application for you. And what's cool is that it gives you a few execution scripts that you can use from the command line, like yarn start. You've already been using that to spin up your development environment, your web server, all of the things that you need to just write React code out of the box. Not only does it do that for you, the other benefit to Create React App is that it will use, they will take care of your versioning for you. So if you're missing one package that is out of sync, anytime you go and you run Create React App, you get the most up-to-date features of React, the most standard trusted release, okay? So what's really awesome is that now it's just a single command to build a React project. You don't need anything else other than that. And we're gonna learn about this npx command, okay? So who knows what node or npm stands for? You may have covered this a little bit with Josh, but I don't expect everyone to have know this right away. Okay, Node Package Manager. Okay, so npm stands for Node Package Manager. Let me just take a sip of water really quick. Excuse me. So yeah, it stands for Node Package Manager. And what it is it's a software management system that's built for developers, okay? So software that we use as developers to build software. And NPM came about with the Node ecosystem. And it's essentially the de facto open source tooling environment for web development and software development today. So anytime you run yarn, okay, you are actually using NPM. So yarn is sort of an abstraction on top of NPM, okay? So let's dive into the docs and let's see kind of what this is. So you could go and you could learn all about NPM and learn about how it works and what it's working with just by going through their getting started. But the first question that I wanted to answer was, what is NPM? NPM opens up an entire world of JavaScript talent for you and your team. It's the world's largest software registry with about 3 billion downloads per week. Okay, and whether you are aware of this or not, you have already been using NPM. Anytime, like I said, you run a yarn ad, you are basically using NPM under the hood. Okay, the registry contains over 600,000 packages, building blocks of code. Open source developers from every continent use NPM to share and borrow packages, and many organizations use NPM to manage private development as well. Okay. So what does this all look like? If I were to go back to the other screen, we could search for some packages that we have available to us, okay? One of the things that is on NPM is React. So you can go and you can run yarn add React, and it's gonna come in here, and it's gonna grab this NPM package for you. An NPM package to get you immediate access to React without also requiring the JSX transformer. This is especially useful for cases when you want to use Browserify for your module. So Look, var React equals require React. We use import React from React now. But look at the weekly downloads for React. We can see how many people have downloaded React, and you are actually a part of this number. This week, when you have run yarn to get your dependencies in your projects, or this last week, you were part of this number. So you are part of the 3 or 2.7 million individuals who downloaded React in the last 7 days. So it's really cool. This is how we work with systems now, okay? This is all an aside because we needed to learn about this today because later on we're going to be learning about a package that we're going to use in our environment, okay? But what's cool is normally when you run a CLI, you have to install it globally. But now there's this npx command, which actually allows you with certain packages to get some binary executable files spun up on your environment, and then it will take those and basically run like an npm install over those files, okay? So we're going to be using this command this morning to boilerplate or build out a bare bones, bare minimum React application without having to install a single piece of software on our machines. Okay, so normally, like with Less, you probably had to install globally the package Less to get the CLI if you were working within it. It's been a while since I've used any Less, so I'm not sure exactly what the ecosystem's like, but this is what you can relate that to something you've already done. Okay, you would have to npm install globally the package, install it on your machine, and then you could use that package. Now, we're just going to use this cool little npx command that does it for us without having to install anything at all. Okay? So, if you already have npm or create React app installed globally, that's a very good question. Don't worry about it. You can just keep it on your machine. I don't have it installed globally, so I'm going to use npx. I've since uninstalled it because I don't need it, right? npx does it in a really, really cool way. But if you have it, don't worry. That's totally fine, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to run this command. We're going to get a project up and running. I'm going to walk you through that project, and then I'm going to have you do the same thing on your own and even create your first React app from scratch if you haven't already done so, okay? Which is the large majority of us. So just watch me for a second. Don't try and follow along. I'm just going to do this myself, and then what I'll have you do is I'll have you repeat these steps on your own, okay? So I'm going to go ahead and cd into a directory called desktop just so that we can see this happen. And it's going to pull up on my other desktop. So I'm just going to get my other window ready for me to receive these items. Okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run npx create React app. This is the command that you will run if you don't want to install create React app globally. If you have it installed globally, you will just remove the npx command. Okay, so I'm just going to run npx create React app, and I'm just going to call it like the documentation says my app. Okay, and if you follow a convention like this, then you will get a prompt that says, "Hey, fix your convention," because all npm packages kind of need to be the same, but we don't need to worry about that for now. So I'm just going to create a React application. And I'm trying to watch it install right on my desktop. There it is. Okay. So the question came in, and while this is installing, somebody asked, why wouldn't I want to install this globally? Well, for me, I just, if I don't have to install it globally, I don't like to. That's kind of my motto. It's not best or better practices one way or another. In fact, installing globally may be preferred by most developers, right? But let's see what just happened as I'm trying to pull this over onto my other desktop, but it's not working. So let's just see what happened as I look at a Finder window. So you can see like my file system. We'll go to my desktop. And if you notice, I just created this little app. My app, it's got its node modules, a package.json file, public directory, src, readme, yarn lock. Does this look familiar to anyone? This is the same way that we have been building our projects already, okay? So you are already familiar with this process. You just have never had to run the command yet. We have done it for you. So we have given you repositories that look exactly like this, okay? So now let's follow the prompts. As soon as you get a success, the Create React App message will come back and tell you that you created an app at your title. I called it my app. Let me just zoom in on this. I called it my app, so that's what they're telling me got installed. Okay. Now it's giving me a few hints as to what I can do in terms of installing or running this application. I can run it with a yarn start, which will basically start my localhost development server. I could run a yarn build, which will bundle the app into static files for production. So those of you who were able to deploy to Netlify last week, this command got run by Netlify, okay? I can run yarn test to start running some tests over my code, which we're gonna learn about in future weeks. You're gonna learn all about testing. And then you can run yarn eject, which will then remove all of the tools that you get from this dependency and give you basically a boilerplated React app with a Webpack configuration from scratch, which is really nice if you're building a project and you just want to basically bootstrap the project and then take it over from there. Now, if you run eject, you can never go back. That's the main rule there. They will basically take control out of their hands. By they, I mean the Facebook team, and put it, completely into your hands, okay? So you just need to know that these things exist. The only one that you're ever going to use at Lambda School will be yarn start and probably yarn build when you get to Lambda Labs and you're building a React project, okay? So now we suggest that you begin typing cd my app yarn start, and then a beautiful little message, happy hacking, okay? So as that downloaded, we got a whole bunch of dependencies. These are the packages that were installed from NPM into our node modules directory. Okay, so that's how NPM works. We take all of the packages that we basically need. Let's say that this little cloud is NPM. And then by running create React app, what we did is we said, hey, we want all of these things like yards, parser. Like, you didn't have to explicitly type this out. Your packages know what they depend on, right? So don't worry about that. But as soon as we ran create React app, we basically went and installed all of these into our node modules. I'm just going to do node _m so you know what I'm talking about. Node mods, we'll do that. Node modules directory. Okay, so inside of your application, you went and pulled in those files that live on the NPM registry, and you pulled them into your node modules, which is why we can use import syntax like import React from capital React, because it just goes and imports it from the local node modules directory. Okay, so tying it all together, this is exactly what Create React App did for us under the hood. Sweet. Now, and that's what's so cool. One single command did all of that. It went and got all of these dependencies that we need to work within a React ecosystem, and it's managing those dependencies for you. Look at all the Babel stuff, right? Imagine if you had to go and manage all of this just to learn React. We probably wouldn't be teaching React if this tooling wasn't here for us at Lambda School, because it is so big. Or we would have to spend a week on Webpack and a couple days on Babel and then start to learn React. So now you don't need to learn that stuff to even get involved with React, which is what's super awesome. Okay? All right, so we've done a lot. Well, I've talked a lot, and we learned a lot. So I'm wondering if there's any questions that may have come up along the way. Are all the packages on NPM trustworthy? Unfortunately, no, but there are. So the idea is that it's kind of like Airbnb. You would not stay in an Airbnb that has terrible reviews, right? People are, it's a social construct, right? It's a social idea that it's like, hey, this person's place was nice. It lived up to its expectations, right? And that's just kind of the way that NPM is as well. Open source software, we just trust that everything will work. You can trust everything from what we teach you here at Lambda School because it's all published by big names like React and then bigger companies and stuff like that. So you can trust everything that we teach you here at Lambda School. Nothing malicious should happen. Any other questions? If you eject, the version control management is still and will remain active. Yes. Yep. So if you eject, you still have it. So Git is mutually exclusive from Create React App. So it's not its own. It's its own thing. Cool. You'll get a whole bunch of changes if you eject because a whole bunch of new files will exist. Okay. So lastly, the last step that I'm going to take is I'm going to CD into my app exactly like it suggests, and I'm going to get this project up and running. Okay. And I'm just going to run yarn start, and we'll see what happens. Now, this is what you have already done as well. You have already done this. You've done this a couple of times now. And this is what a Create React App application looks like on the browser screen. Okay. Yarn equals Ryan. Yep, it is a coincidence. So yeah, this is exactly what the files turn into once it's all bundled and linked through your index.js file and your index.html file. Okay, this is what happens. We give those two files, the index.html and the bundled up JavaScript file, to the local host, and it serves it up for us. Okay, this is why when you go and you're able to write and save your files, something changes right here on the screen. Okay, the last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the project in my text editor of choice. If you don't have a command to open up your text editor, get one. Go and figure out how to get code installed. That's really, really easy. You could just Google code command line installation, and it'll come up. Okay. But let's dive in and let's see what this project gave us. It looks a lot like the projects that you have been working in already, only it's got a big giant README that allows you to know everything you need to know about Create React App. Okay, so kind of a fun little README there. You can always just go in and delete it if you want, and make your own README because they've now given you the software. It's now your software that you're building. So everything that will exist, that will live and breathe inside of this SRC directory. This is part of the ecosystem within React. We choose source as this source for all of our components and styles and assets and all of the things that we may or may not need through our application development process. Which is why we have that index.js file right here. Okay. So every single time for now that you build out a Create React App, you can simply ignore this register service worker file and the invocation of that service worker. You could even delete it if you so wanted to. And the other thing that you can ignore for the next few weeks is this app.test.js file. In fact, if you were to deploy this up to Code Sandbox and have this test file and you have changed app.js, this test will break and you will not be able to run your code. Okay, so some of the things just to look out for along the way. You can delete the register service worker, you can delete the app.test file, and you'd be set. Okay. Now remember, everything starts in app within all of our React applications. App would be the parent component that basically is the container for all of our React components that we will build. Okay. And from there on out, all of the rest of your components should live in a directory that you call components. Okay? Now remember, some of the best parts to this is that as soon as you go and change this and save your file, watch what happens to your web server. It goes and automatically updates. I can't tell you how important that process is you're just going to have to take it for granted, or take it from me, that that is absolutely phenomenal. The idea that you never have to go and refresh your browser again for front-end development is amazing. Think about art. When you're painting a picture, you put your paintbrush to canvas with your paint on the paintbrush. You immediately see that the red line that you just drew is a red line. Okay, we kind of get the opportunity to do a very similar thing here in the React development ecosystem, in the entire front-end ecosystem. This idea is called hot module replacement. As soon as you save your file, it'll go and refresh the browser, which is so nice. We get instant feedback of what we just created. So if I then go and I break something, right, I know exactly the change that broke. Like that line that I just broke was right there, right? And I never have to refresh my page. So those are the major benefits, okay? The major benefits being the things that we talked about at the beginning, where you don't have to learn the tooling anymore. All you have to do is run a single command and you have everything you need. The hot module replacement, the instant file building and structure that you need to build to get up and running with the React application. These are all the benefits to using Create React App. You can focus on what's important by simply using CRA. Cool? All right, now it's your turn. Your goal is to go into Training Kit. There's a little process right there, and see how far you can get. Let's see. Let me get you the right link. I just minimized all of my windows. There it is. So in Create React App, in Training Kit, there is a challenge that has a few bullet points that I want you to follow. Okay? So here's the link if you want to pull it up on your screen. And then I will keep it on my browser as well. This challenge right here is what I want you to focus on. So the above process is what we just did, right? What I just did in class. Go and run npx create React app, or if you have it installed globally, just create React app and create an application from scratch called React Avengers. Okay? Then you're going to change your state and everything. Just follow these steps, and we will meet back in about 10 minutes. Cool? So I'll give you 10 minutes, and then we'll do a 5-minute solution on that. Have fun. Okay, if you're still working, that's fine. Just take a pause for a second. This is something that will only take you a couple of minutes to do, and you can do it on your own. We're just going to dive right in, and we're going to solve this little problem right away. Okay, so I'm going to stop my development server here. By the way, if you ever need to stop a development server, just go into the console, wherever that server is running. Notice that I know it's running because there's this little cursor here that's telling me that something is up and running, right? Down here, if I have, my directory, my username, the directory I'm in, and who is using the computer, then I know that I'm not running a process, right? This is telling me that I'm running a process. So if you ever want to stop the process, just go into that terminal and run a Control-C, and that's the same for Git Bash for the Windows. I think it's the same for Command Prompt as well. Just Control-C will terminate a process. Correct me if I'm wrong if that's the case. So. And yeah, no, don't worry if you miss the second step. It's easy to miss, especially for, we're not command line aficionados yet. You have very minimal experience using the command line, so don't feel bad if you missed a process, right? It takes time to memorize these steps. So I'm going to actually just CD back out of this directory and back into my desktop, and I'm going to do these same steps that you were supposed to do to solve this little challenge. And then we'll break for a few minutes for a quick morning break. Okay, I'm going to run npx create React app. And I'm going to run React Avengers as the title. Okay, so what this is going to do is it's going to build a project, a React project in my desktop directory. Okay, so it's going to go and it's going to do all this process. And for the reason I gave us a full 10 minutes to do this is because some people's internet's slow, some people have bandwidth issues, or this process can take a while. This takes way too long for me, and I feel like I'm on pretty updated internet. So I hate that this ecosystem. Installing all these dependencies is a bummer, but that's the reality of the JavaScript world. Okay, it's just node modules forever. It's node modules all the way down, one could say. Okay, so now that I have installed this project, they gave me two little prompts: CD. And Noah, this was the step that you mentioned you had missed, and I'm sure there's many of us who did, so don't worry about it. CD into React Avengers, so the project that you created, and then run yarn start. So to know that I'm in that directory, my command line will give me hints. Okay, your terminal, your command prompt will tell you where you are at. Okay, it's kind of it's the same thing as the Finder window. It's just through this. Or the program files. What do you call that? I forget Windows. It's been years since I've been on Windows. But yeah, the same as the Finder window, or searching for your Windows, like your directories. Okay, this is how you can kind of think about the command line, right? Now I know that we're in React Avengers. I can run yarn start. So the only reason that I can run yarn start is because I have a package JSON file. Which is why Noah, Ash, and I were able to dissect and say, oh, you need a CD into that proper directory, okay? Because by running yarn, we are implying that this project has a package JSON, which is a map of the tools that we need from NPM. That's what package JSON is. It's a map of the tools that we need from NPM, okay? So I can run yarn start, and in the meantime, while I'm building that little server, and here it comes. Get rid of that. Okay. While that server is getting up and running, I'm going to CD back out and CD into React Avengers, and I'm going to pull up my code in my text editor. Okay. Pull up my project in my text editor, and if I look, not only do I have my text editor, I also have my live web development server up and running. So as I save my files here, I can it'll automatically update. Okay. And if you were to finish this problem, the problem was to set up a state object. So for that, I'm going to use the constructor. Remember, you don't have to anymore, but I want you to for the next, actually, this will probably be the last week, and then I'll allow you to just not use the constructor if you don't have to anymore. You can figure out the syntax there on your own. If you're like me and you want to just be comfortable in your constructor environment, stick with the constructor. Okay, people would maybe scoff at me for using it because I don't have to anymore, but I'm fine to use it. I enjoy it. Okay, and I'm just going to set up my Avengers as an array of Avengers. Iron Man is Black Widow. She's an Avenger, right? Isn't that her name? Then there's Hawkeye. We have Hulk. And we have Thor. Cool, got a list of Avengers. There's probably a dozen more that I could fill that up with. And then instead of this p tag, I'm going to render those Avengers out. So this was the task, to build your very first project from the ground up, including creating all the files that you need for this project to run. Okay. So here we have, we're going to loop over our Avengers, this .state.avengers.map, and for each Avenger, give me a div with the Avenger name, which is just a string, so I can just type in Avenger. That string will be this. And then the key, I'll just put down as the Avenger. There's only ever going to be one Avenger with that name. So as soon as my app refreshes, as soon as I saved my screen, I got my Avengers printed to the screen. Question came up, couldn't find an Avengers API that you didn't have to sign up for. Very lame, very true. Disney won't have that. You could build one on your own, but good luck. Just don't tell them. Cool. Yeah, so that's just the first few Avengers that came at the top of your head. But virtually, this is the process. This is what we do to build apps. This is how we start our projects these days. And this is what you are going to do first thing this afternoon. As soon as you're done reading through the instructions for your day one README, you will follow these steps and you will build your own Instagram project. It's an Instagram clone. Okay. I like Andrew's example, Andrew's idea. Charles then said, how would you then start a repository and link your news server to your repository? Those are the final steps for the challenge, and that's fair that we go and solve them. So let's do that really quickly. I'm going to go to my GitHub, because your GitHub needs to have a place for the repository to exist. And I'm just going to use my own personal. So I'll go to my own personal GitHub account. And I'm going to create a new repo, and it's going to be called React Avengers. Okay? So I'm going to create it as public because I'm not an organization and I don't pay for my own GitHub. And I'm going to use create repository. It says initialize repository with a README. Don't need it. We'll go and tweak our README. Okay? Now you'll notice that there are some steps. As soon as you've created a new repo, you click on the little plus button and click new repository. Okay, you can then follow these steps. So the first thing you want to do is run a git init command inside of your repository. That's going to initialize a hidden file, a git history object, a git history file, and basically put git inside of your React application, right? This directory, it'll just initialize it with a git. Then you can add a README, you can add your first commit, git remote add origin, and then the origin that you will add will be the URL that is tied to your repository name. So my name, app name.git. It's done through HTTP. Okay? And then you say git push -u origin master. -u kind of initializes this as an upstream. It's really nice. So the steps are right there, or push an existing repository from the command line. Okay? For us, we need to do all of these steps because we don't need to add README because we already have one. Let's go and tweak the README to say React Avengers, the de facto Ravengers instead. the de facto raw Avengers application for demonstrating my abilities to use create React app. Cool. Just a little plug for the description. So then I run those steps, and I have them memorized because I've done this 13,000 times. Get init, initialized empty Git repository inside of React Avengers.git. So look, there's a little hidden file. A dot before the file name means that it's hidden. Means that I can't just do an ls and find it. If I did an ls-a, ls-a, yeah, it'll show you that it added this hidden file. Cool. ls is just list the files, list what the files are in this repository. Remember, you need to always make sure that when you're running these commands that you're inside of the directory that you want to be in. Don't initialize a Git repository at your root. You'll be tracking every single file in a Git repository, and that just gets so complicated. I have had to go and recursively remove Git histories with students because they did a Git init at their root. Don't ever do that. Or even at your desktop, or even at any directory that you don't want tracked by Git. Make sure you're inside of the directory that you need tracked. Okay? Now that I have a git init, I can run git commands. So I can do a git add and run a git status. Ooh, cool. I have all these cool new files that I'm going to push up to GitHub. Okay? I've noticed that I've checked in a register service worker file. I don't want that because I don't want that register service worker. So I'm going to come and I'm going to delete that file. And then what's going to happen is my app is going to break. Fail to compile, we don't have a register service worker. So let's go to where we're using that. We're trying to import it from here. And let's get rid of that function invocation as well. And we're back to square one. So if you got rid of that register service worker file, make sure you get rid of where you're importing it. So delete this line 5, and then delete where you're invoking the service worker. And then you should be back to square one. If you didn't do that, you'll get this error, and it says, hey, no such file directory, looking for a register service worker. Okay, it's telling you that you forgot to delete this line, and then delete the invocation. Cool? So lastly, the last couple of steps inside of the Git creation. Now we can go and run a commit, okay? Now that we stage those commits, git add again, restage. Okay, awesome. Git commit, and I'm just going to say init new dir for React Ravengers. Cool. So now we're ready to push some changes, but our local machine has no clue where to push these changes. So if you go back to the steps from your new repository and say git remote add origin, you can literally just copy and paste these things over. If I look at git status on branch, nothing to commit. I have no commits to put, or no commits. My working tree is clean. If I run a git remote -v, it'll show you that my remote is now pointing to origin at that URL. So I can fetch and push to that. Hooray. Last thing I need to do is push to my origins master branch. And I've literally just copied and pasted those commands over. It's that easy. Now if I go and refresh my Git repository, boom, it's up and running. So those were the last couple of steps. A lot to do there, but it's all, as soon as you click on new repository, it's all good to go from there. Okay? All right, gang, let's take a longer break this morning because we've talked and done some stuff for a while, so we'll just do 8 minutes. And we'll meet back and we'll go over a really cool tool called PropTypes. Adam asked, are we ever going to go over deploys? Yes, we are. You learn all about Heroku in backend project week, and there will be a little module on Netlify for front-end project week. So we'll go over deployment. Not at length because we're not creating DevOps engineers here. We're creating web engineers, right? So, okay. Go take a break. Okay, so should all be getting settled back in. Does anyone have any questions about Create React App, about what it is, what it does? Is there anyone, maybe I should ask a different question. How confident are you feeling, scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 5? Okay, putting a poll in Slack. So how confident are you feeling with Create React App and your ability to create a React application using the commands that we went through today? So, because you're gonna have to do it this afternoon, so I wanna make sure that you're feeling pretty darn confident at this point. So I'm just gonna go ahead and do a scale of 1 to 5. 1 would be, there's no chance that you could do it. 3 would be, yeah, I think I could do it. 5 would be, I'm pretty darn confident. Okay. I'd love to go over favicon. We're not going to cover favicon today or anything like that. So for now, you'll just have to read up on that if it's something that you want to change out and swap out. You probably noticed that your project that you played around with on Friday, the React Wars, had a little Stormtrooper favicon in there. It's by design. It was just a little fun thing. So, okay. All right, so the majority of us are pretty dang confident that we could set up a project using Create React App. I mean, only 39 voted, which tells me that not everyone's back from the break. So come back if you aren't. How would you add less to this? There's actually a setup. So that's a good point. It's a good question because you guys love less. So less in Create React App. If you look, how can I use less with Create React App? It's an issue in GitHub. A simple way to help Create React App work with less. So if I went to all of these, the top 3 articles or top 3 searches, adding Sass or less to support to Create React App. So there's a good Medium article on potentially how you could get that set up, right? And it probably has for Sass, it has everything you would need. Ooh, I wouldn't follow this one. But yeah, I think there's a way to do it relatively easily. If anyone has done it, that'd be an awesome brown bag. Or like, hey, if anyone has not, if somebody figures it out, what I recommend is you teach the rest of your classmates how to do it. So those that are interested, if you figure it out, which it's not on the docket for today, so if you finish today's MVP, then you can go and you figured it out, that would be awesome. So the last part over Git is the only part that I'm hesitant about. That's fine. You're going to be just pushing to your fork for your projects. We can do a Q&A or a little impromptu lecture on Git later on. So yeah. So if you were to follow, I mean, it looks like this is a common issue that a lot of people have run into. And it looks like there may be some workarounds or some little steps to get it integrated. But I do believe that it does support it. It just needs a less loader. I've seen students do it before, right? Yeah, I know that there is. Here you go. Adding a CSS preprocessor, Sass and less, right there in the Create React App README. So that's the one. That's what I was looking for. Oh, it looks like Ash added the same link. Cool. Great minds. Yeah, so it's right there. You'll just have to modify your JSON, package.json file. Okay? All right. Any other questions? We won't go back over that last Git part today, but we can go over it another time. You don't need to know it directly by heart today, and that's fine. Okay? All right. Let's forge ahead and let's talk about something that's really important. Something that plagues the JavaScript ecosystem because of the way that the language was built. And when I say plague, I use that term loosely. I don't use it exactly, as maybe as it intends. I'm using the term plague because people scoff about JavaScript for it being a dynamically typed language. Okay, so JavaScript is dynamically typed. What does that mean? It means when I go and I create a variable and save that variable in memory, okay, I have added quotes around this variable. I've typed this out, but I have not told JavaScript, and I never will tell JavaScript unless I'm using a type system. I'm never gonna tell JavaScript that this variable is going to be of type string. JavaScript assumes that on its own. Okay? So where this comes in handy for us as developers is I don't have to sit and, a statically typed language would look a lot like this by saying string const my variable. So this place in memory will be of type string, right? This is something that I would have to physically type out in a static type language. In fact, there's probably quite a few of you who come from a static type environment. They're fantastic when it comes to preventing bugs, right? Because I'm telling the JavaScript compiler is putting trust and confidence on me, the developer, by saying when I declare this variable, I know that every single time my var needs to be a string, okay? And so unless I'm using a system like Flow or TypeScript, I will never have to do this in JavaScript. So what are the benefits to that? I just don't have to physically type things out. I can just let the JavaScript compiler do it for me. I can let JavaScript say, oh, that thing I just typed out will be a string. Okay? Same thing with all other data types in JavaScript. So where does this come in handy? Well, if my variable, let's let it so we can change it later. If my variable is going to be set to the number 30, okay, and then I have, and I want to say my var equals the string 30. Notice that I did double equals there. There's a reason for that. We'll go over in just a second. Basically what I've said is that the string 30 is equal to the number 30. So there's some craziness there because I have two different representations of 30, one of them being a string, one of them being a number, and loosely equaling one another. That statement is true. When I evaluate whether my var is the same value, right, as the string 30, that's true. That's actually a true statement. If I wanted to coerce it, okay, and say, hey, we want these two to be explicitly equals to one another, then yes, 30 would equal 30. So this is kind of an issue with JavaScript because sometimes we declare something and we expect it to be one data type, okay? But I can go and I can then overwrite my var, not overwrite it, but reassign it and set it equal to Ryan, right? And now type of my var is a string, whereas one point or another, it should have been a number. So if I had had a type system over this variable, I would have never been able to do this, convert it over to a string, okay? And then there wouldn't be this weird double equals thing in JavaScript, which is crazy for a lot of developers that come from other languages. I don't come from other languages. I know a few other languages and I know how to work with them. So I know the benefits and cons, but JavaScript was my first programming language. So for me, this is just how the world works. And so for you, if that is the same for you, if that statement rings true, this is how the world works. We have dynamic typing. I can just simply at will create a variable and set it equal to the data type of my choice. Right? I know when I go to invoke this that it's going to be a function, right? I couldn't use this way because I can't say my var and invoke it. Uh-oh, type error, my var is not a function, right? We have assumed that it is a function by invoking it. But what is it? It's a string. Okay? So take all that, store it in memory, and just know that JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. Ruby on Rails, or Ruby is a dynamic type language as well. PHP has some dynamic typing. So there's a lot of languages out there that we use, scripting languages that we use in the web world that are actually dynamically typed. So it's not just JavaScript that has this problem. So, and the problem that I'm getting at is that sometimes we may have a function. Let's go back to our function example. That's going to, return a string, right? So we may have a function, or it's going to return some value. Okay. So if I have a function here, my adder is a function that's going to take in x and y, and it's going to simply return x plus y. Okay, so my adder could be invoked with the numbers 1 and 2. I know, the developer, that this will go and evaluate as a mathematical expression 1 plus 2. Now, what happens if I send that a different data type? Well, it's just going to work. We just concatenated 1 and the number 2 together. They just coerced it to a string. Okay, this is weird behavior because we built a function that we want to add 1 plus 2, but we're using it with strings. What happens if I were to build an object and send that object forward? 1 plus object, right? This is behaving in a special way that we didn't intend it to behave. We thought that every single time that my adder was invoked, it would return x and y added together mathematically. So these parameters, when they become arguments, should be numbers, right? This is one of the problems. The developer built this function in a bad way. So let's do this again with new my adder, just to get the point home that we could do an x and y. And then I'm just going to break a function block here so that we can get some real estate. And I'm just going to say if x, or type of x, does not equal number, okay, then return the string, give me x must be a number. Okay? Now I have to do the same thing with y. So I'll just copy and paste it. If type of y now is not a number, then I will say y must be an integer. Otherwise, we'll just return x plus y, the evaluation. So now we've reached this line in our code. We have not returned yet because we have not hit either of these. If we reach this line of code, both x and y will be numbers. Okay, new myAdd takes in the string 5 and 5 number. X must be an int. Okay, so I know that I screwed that function up. And now we need to test it again with x, with y. Y must be an int. Okay? This is a pain, right? To check the type of the data that you're passing this function is a big pain. It's one of the big pains of working in the JavaScript ecosystem. So, what does this mean for y'all? What does this mean for React? Right? Because we're passing data around a lot in React. Does anyone remember by which mechanism we pass data around in React? What is the object called that we use in a component to pass data to it? Props, right? So, React knew that this was a problem, the React team, and they said, hey, in development mode, when a developer is building a React application, we are going to make a package, an NPM package, that allows us to check the type of data and ensure that that component is receiving the type of data that it should receive. Okay? So we expect when we build a component, especially because we're going to be building components with the idea of reusability in mind, right? What if you built a button component that takes a text property and some function that needs to be there to make that component work, some handler function. And the developer using your button component, your teammate, doesn't know that that button needs those things. Well, React gave us prop types. So we can type check with prop types. And notice it is an NPM package, okay? 3,298,656 downloads in the last week. It comes from Facebook's GitHub, okay? So their project, their open source. Now, the cool thing about prop types is the history of prop types is that it was originally a part of the React ecosystem, okay? Now that we are beyond 15.5, we use the prop types library instead. It's now its own library. It used to come standard with React, now it doesn't, okay? And then the documentation for this, which is found in your training kit, by the way, but I will link in Slack, is actually pretty neat. Okay, the documentation shows you how to get up and running with prop types. And notice how simple it actually is. All you have to do is import prop types from prop types. If we're importing it from prop types without a /, where does this package come from? We touched on this briefly today. The node modules directly. So, if it's going to be found in the node modules directory, that means we install it through what mechanism? NPM and yarn, exactly. Awesome. Yarn add prop types is exactly the idea, okay? So we're going to actually use this library, but first I want us to look at the documentation and see how it works. So notice here that we have this greeting component that is receiving some props from above. This greeting component has one name prop that we can check on an object called camel case prop types. Here's what's going to kill a lot of us today. Prop types, Pascal cased. Okay, so the API, we call it Pascal case. The node module, we call it kebab case, right? Or this could be snake case. I don't remember which is which. But it's just lowercase hyphen prop types, right? And then we have Pascal case where it's capitalized P, capitalized T. This is strict convention. You need to follow this convention, otherwise you're going to run into problems. Here's where it gets even more confusing. We have a third convention pattern here. Greeting, and then you put, just like default props, you put the camel case version of prop types on the component itself. And you declare that as an object, which will then take key value pairs. The keys being mapped to the props that you'll feed to greeting, the value being the reference to the API, and the string or the type that you want it to be. Okay? All right, underscore is snake case. So this is kebab case then. Okay? So this is how you work with prop types. It's kind of a pain because you're gonna have a typo. I guarantee it. 100% guarantee you're gonna have a typo. All right? Screaming snake case. Nice. Okay. You forgot camel case, Eric. So here is the API. Here's what we can check for. We can check if a data type being passed down as props is an array. Okay? We can check if it's a Boolean, a function, a number, an object, a string, or a symbol. Okay? And then there's this node, an element. Don't worry about these. We're never going to get to those. And notice that all of them, they're kind of naming as optional. We'll go over that in just a minute. Because there is a flag that's called is required, which we're going to go over. Okay? Not only do we have those, we can also get a step further because we can do array of, object of, and shape. Okay? So array of is we're expecting something to be an array of a certain type, right? So it could be an array of strings. If you have an array of all strings, if you have an array of all objects, which would be a JSON object, right? If you have an array of all functions, if you have an array of all arrays, then you would use array of a certain type. And all of these have a good little comment of how they would be used and a good example. Okay? You also have one of type, one of, right? Because you could give this an innumerable amount of things, okay? And say that, oh, this could be either news or photos or whatever. It's an enum, innumerable amount, or one of type. So don't get too caught up on these, the one ofs, okay? The things that we care about are the actual primitives and reference types in JavaScript. So reference types being arrays and objects, and primitives being booleans, functions, numbers, strings, and then symbol would be a reference as well. Okay, but yeah, those are the types in JavaScript. Those are the types of data that we have. Okay, what we are going to care about though is shape and array of and object of. Or actually, I don't want you to care about object of either. So the things you need to care about are shape, array of, and then all of the originals, the OGs. Okay? So let's see how this all works. Now that we kind of have read the documentation, which I have linked in Slack, we are going to figure out how this all works and how it works within a React ecosystem. Right here, we have an array of strings. Okay? We're not passing this as props anywhere. So let's change that by creating a file in a components directory. You don't have to follow along with me. This is just your Avengers project that we put together earlier. I will deploy this up to Code Sandbox at the end of this, and then you're going to practice doing this as well with an array of objects. It's going to be pretty cool. Okay? Okay, so let's create a new folder, or I'm going to create a new folder. You don't follow along. Don't want you to follow along because I don't want you to get lost. Okay? And then I'm going to create a new file called Avengers.js. And we're going to take our, hey, there we go. Our little, stateless functional component. And we're going to say that this is going to be our Avengers list, okay? Which is then going to do that same logic that we had done earlier in app.js, and that's what this is going to be. So then I can pass in Avengers, import it, okay, from Avengers. Save that. It's going to break until I do this. And we'll say return div. And instead of this.state, we're going to have to say props. Props isn't going to be defined yet because we need to pass it down. There we go. Okay. So now we have essentially refactored our application so that it can pass the Avengers array down to our Avengers component. We are passing an array of strings here. Okay? So, because we are passing props, we should check our data and make sure that the data that we are sending is the data that we expect this to be. Because if I send this an object instead of an array, Avengers is not defined. Avengers list. There it is. So our Avengers list is now going to print out our Avengers, But what happens if the shape of our data changes? And I send in an object, and that's not going to work because these would then be, let's see, let's just send it a single Avenger, right? Well, we can't loop over a string. Well, can't map over a string, I should say, because map is an array method. It doesn't work. So we effectively broke our application because our data changed. So how do we ensure that this doesn't happen? Because instead of getting that nasty error, I could just get a warning that says, hey, things are not as they should be, right? And we are looping over an innumerable amount of things. What if eventually down the road, this is a more common use case, right? This last one is like, I can't mount an object. That doesn't work, okay? So we have problems here. We have some inherent problems. We need to check this data before it gets sent the way that we're trying to use it, okay? And this will become more handy when we're away from arrays, but for now, we're just gonna work on Avenger list to make sure that whoever is using this component knows that it has to be used a certain way, right? A very good question just came in asking about APIs. Is PropTypes most important when working and using APIs? Yes, that's when it becomes really handy. But today, you're going to be given a large data set that is an array of objects. And each item has about 5 or 6 different data types, or each object has about 5 or 6 different data types, and an array of strings after that, or an array of objects. So we have nested data. So using PropTypes will really help you out with today's data as well. And before we end this morning, I will go over what your data looks like that you'll be working with. But for now, what you need to know is that I can now npm install or yarn add PropTypes from npm. So I'm going to do that right away. Just go grab my terminal. And inside of this directory, I'm going to run yarn add prop/types. And let's see what physically changes within our application. Our package.json file will update with what we just installed. Okay? So when I told you earlier that, and this should actually be a dev dependency, but we're not going to go over that. I told you earlier that this PropTypes directory will come from npm. And I told you that package.json was a map to your npm packages. Okay? So this map, this object, maps us the packages that we need within the React ecosystem for this project. So we just ran a yarn add and then we installed this key value pair in our npm, in our package.json file. So now anyone who goes and runs yarn install, it will go and pull in PropTypes for this project. Okay? All right, that's neither here nor there, but it's important to see that distinction that when we ran yarn add, it went and pulled in that PropTypes directory. So the last thing that we need to do to our Avengers list is make sure that our Avengers is actually an array. Okay? Because we want, and it's an array of strings is really what we want. We want to make sure that the array, the data type and everything is just going to be an array of strings because there's no Avenger with a number, a numerical name, right? So I'm going to type in a Avenger list and, before I do this, so back up, I need to pull in PropTypes. So I import Pascal case, PropTypes from kebab case PropTypes. That's because that's what the npm package is called, and the global default object of that package is Pascal case PropTypes. That's the API for working with it. And now I have to do camel case PropTypes and set that equal to an object that we're going to say, hey, the props, this is going to mirror the object that we want passed around. So I'm going to say that Avengers needs to be an array of, and we're going to put, I can't just do array of, I have to do PropTypes dot array of, and then I can say here PropTypes dot string. So effectively, what did we just achieve? Well, not a ton, because it's not a super sophisticated data set. It's just an array of strings. But we said that every single time that this component gets mounted, PropTypes is going to check to make sure that it is sending an array of strings to it. So if I go and I add some numerical value and save that, look at what's going to happen in my command line. Warning, you got a failed prop type. Number supplied to Avengers list, but expected a string. So you have a little checker. Instead of doing type of foo equals bar, you get the check automatically using the PropTypes API. Okay? And where this becomes super handy is especially when you have like an array of objects. Okay? So let me take this one step further and create an Avenger. And for each Avenger, we are going to pass down the key of Avenger and the Avenger as that object. Right now it's a string, but bear with me for 1 minute. Okay. So I'm going to create a file called Avenger.js, and we're going to import React, and we're going to call it a stateless functional component. And it's going to take in an object called Avenger on props. Whoops, didn't mean to do that. And we're going to return a div with the props.avenger.name. Okay, we're going to expect that this is going to receive an object. So I'm going to come back out to my app and I'm going to change my data. And instead of being all this, we're going to be an array of objects here. Whoops. Whoops. Sorry, let me just grab everything. And then this one to make this super easy. This is some mouse clickery work at work. Okay. And then their ID will be set to the number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So now we have an array of objects, which is what most data is going to look like. I can share some shortcuts later. All I was doing was alt-clicking. Okay? So I have an array of objects. My shape of my data has changed. Now I'm passing it around an array of objects. And when I iterate over that array of objects, Avengers gets this state of Avengers. Go to the Avengers list, props.avengers.map. Oh. And for each Avenger, give me a new Avenger. Avenger is not defined. Oh, inside of here. Okay, to pull in that file. There we go. Look at my prop types telling me, hey, failed prop type, invalid props, Avengers at 0 of type of object supplied. So I gave it an object instead of a string. And it's like, dude, you're checking for strings. Okay, and then I have encountered 2 children with the same key, object to object. Oh, so key needs to be Avenger.id now. Okay, so because I changed it to be an ID. So now, what do I need to change this to make it so that that warning goes away? I want to go with Catherine's typo. Reject object. You're a good sport, Catherine. So we're going to say this is going to be an array of objects. But now we need to go down to Avenger, and we're going to check the shape of this object. So we're not going to use object of, we're going to use the shape tool. Because shape will allow you to pass it an object of innumerable types, of different types. So we can say, oh, color will be a string, font size will be a number. In our case, we have what 2 properties that we need to check. Well, in this case, we only care about the name because that's all this component works with. So I'm going to do that. I'm just going to import prop types. And then I'm going to say avenger.proptypes equals an object. Now we're going to say that avenger, the avenger object itself, is going to be a PropTypes dot shape. So describe the shape of an object. ID, since we're passing the whole object down, is going to be PropTypes dot number, and name is going to be PropTypes dot string. So let's go back to our app and refresh and notice that our stuff went away and our application works the way that we expect it to. So what happens then if I pass Iron Man, instead of passing some string here, I'm going to pass an object. Well, it's going to say that you can't do that because, well, it's not an object yet, sorry. It's going to say I can't do that because it's trying to mount an object to the screen. Let's find a better example. Let's just change Iron Man to 575. Cool. It's still going to print 575 because it's going to turn that into a string because numbers and strings are weird in JavaScript. But look at what happened in our warnings. Failed prop type, invalid prop avenger.name of type number. So notice we're checking the avenger.name when we said shape. Okay? When we said shape right here, we're checking avenger.id, avenger.name. Okay? Supplied to avenger expected string. Oh, so our data is messed up. If I changed it to 575, the string, it would go away. If I change this, I can check to see and make sure that what I'm looking at is what I expect it to be. Now, you're probably wondering to yourself, there's a lot of prop types going on here, a lot of objects being appended to your components. Is this going to make it so that it's super malperformant? Are things going to grow? Is this going to be in production with all these warnings everywhere? The answer to that question is no, right? React will find the prop types package inside of your application when you build for production or send it to Netlify, and it will remove everything from production. It's only a development tool, okay? The question came in, will it error if there's another property in the object it doesn't expect? The answer is no. Location, New York. I don't know where 575 is from. This should be Iron Man. Right? It's not going to error out if you have other stuff that you're not checking. You're just simply not checking for it. But let's say that we wanted to use, and this is the last piece of prop types before I set you free on a little project to play around with prop types. So you can make it so that you require these fields, okay? So I'm going to say location, since it's only on one object, we'll get the warning from it already. I'm going to say prop types dot string, and I'm going to say dot is required, okay? Now, by not making it required, ID and name are just simply optional, and they won't give us warnings if you don't pass them. Our things won't print, right? But you may get some errors. So now we're going to say, oh, failed prop type, the prop avenger.location is marked at required in Avenger, but its value is undefined. So you have some undefined data. So this required flag will just force it so that if the prop is not missing, or if the prop is missing, then, and it's required, then it's going to give you a warning for that. Whereas if I went and got rid of this altogether, I wouldn't get that. It just won't print Iron Man, right? I'm not going to say, it's not going to say that you messed up because it's an optional field. So you can get strict with your rules, well, stricter with your rules by saying is required. And go back and put Iron Man back in. But if I were then to add these to every single oh well. Okay. Then that warning goes away. The required field is met. But if I miss it from one of these objects, then it's going to come back, right? So that's the idea of required, is you can require these to be more strict and say, oh, location is required. And if it's not passed, give us a warning, because ID and name right now are optional. That's where when you look at the React docs for prop types, you'll see optional array of an optional union or whatever. Then you can go and look at the is required flag. And say you can chain any of the above with is required to make sure a warning is shown if the prop isn't provided. So a value of any data type. Oh, they have any data type. This is funny. But okay. So I told you I have a little project for you to work on right now, and then we'll solve it together. So I'll just give you a couple minutes. We may go over into your lunch a little bit, but I want you to expose yourself to this, or be exposed to this content, okay? So I have a little application that is Mr. Lumberg's memos, so quotes from Office Space, one of the funniest movies of all time. And that information is found on state inside of the app component. And then we have a quote list and a quote component. Both of those receive props, and I want you to prop type them checking quote list. Notice that prop types is imported for you already, okay? So I'm gonna give you 5 minutes to work on this, and then we'll rally back, and after lunch, or before you go to lunch, we'll have you solve this little problem. This exact follow-along assignment is found in Training Kit, so if it's something you wanna reiterate over, you can go dive in, okay? So I'll just give you 5 minutes to work on that. And I will be right back. Okay, so we should be meeting back now. So let's fill this in. So the idea was to come into quote list and make sure that it's an array of objects. Okay, so quote list is going to receive an array of objects. Let me just zoom in really quick. Let's fill out our TPS reports really quickly and make sure that we have an array of objects. So I'm going to say that memos equals PropTypes dot array of, and I'm just going to say PropTypes dot object. Okay. Now, if I go to quote, I'm going to look at the shape of this data. This one should be quote dot PropTypes equals an array or an object set to title. So we're going to say that quote equals PropTypes dot shape, where title is going to be equal to a string. Memo is going to be equal to a string, and ID will be equal to that number. And it will be the same for everything. You'll just have to look at the API and the documentation and reference what you need to reference. If it's a function, it's func. If it's a Boolean, it's bool. And now, if I were to go and change one of these to say a string, I should, in my console, be seeing failed prop type, invalid, quote.id of type string supplied to quote expected number. So, takeaway from the prop types example is that I want to make sure that you are aware of this package, and when you see the use case for this package in your data that you're working with, I want you to check the props that you're passing around using prop types. It is so easy and trivial to do so, and there's a lot more to it, of course, because there's a lot more data types that we can check, but I want you to check every single component. And I want you to follow this convention where before you export, make sure you prop type as long as that component is receiving some sort of props. Okay? This is one of those things that we teach because hiring partners who've hired our graduates have asked us that we teach it. It's like, hey, Lambda School would be awesome if this is one of those things that they taught, right? And it's such a commonly used thing, and companies all over the place are using it, and people use it. I use it every day when I write React code. Check your data. It's very important, okay? I use shape because it's an object. Shape is how you check the shape of an object. So object of is a lot less commonly used because you would just have object of like one property type. If you want to check all the property types on an object, just use shape. It's very, very easy to do so. Easy in terms of, it's just, that's the one convention that you can follow for that. Makes it really nice. I'm trying to go back to other comments. Give me a second. Okay, got it. Get it, got it, good. Okay, so this, I'll deploy that Avengers application so you can use it, but I need to jump in and show you your project for the afternoon. Okay, so what you're gonna be working on, and if you cloned this before this morning, there's a new change, so you're gonna have to figure out how to change in GitHub, come on. And we're gonna go and do insta-clone. So I updated your dummy data because these links weren't good to go, and now they are, okay? So the Instagram clone project, you're gonna follow these steps after lunch today. You're gonna go through the introduction, you're gonna read all of the README, talk about your focus. Don't worry about default props, just worry about prop types, okay? You're gonna do your project setup, so you're gonna run create React app or npx create React app. You're gonna do all of this setup, okay? Stuff that we learned today, create React app, and prop types will be used for this project, okay? And then you're just gonna go about architecting your application inside of a components directory, okay? So you're gonna build a components directory, build the component directories that you need, okay? So each one of these will live there, and these steps walk you through that. So this is the first, and if you want to do this with a partner, I highly, highly recommend it, because understanding the vision of what you're trying to build is very, very good is a very good process to do with another partner or somebody else tackling the project with you. So that's the first hour of your afternoon, is just seriously getting this all set up. Okay, there's not a lot of code that you're going to type today that's really required, except for just kind of organizing your components, getting something printed to the screen. And notice if you want to leverage the power of the Bootstrap library, there's steps to get it installed in the React Strap documentation. Really easy to get going there. And we go over that later on this week as well. So if you don't do that, that's fine. But the thing that you need to work with is this dummy data. Dummy data is an array of objects. And you're going to set this on state and pass it around as props. So very similar to what you've been doing. The only difference is now you're working with more sophisticated data. As opposed to an array of objects of 3 fields, you're going to be working with an array of objects with many fields that symbolize the thumbnail image and the username, the actual background image, and all this stuff. Okay? So inside of the dummy data file is where you are going to look. This is the data that you have access to in your application. Okay? Each one of these objects represents, so look how big that is. Each one of these objects represents a Instagram post where you have a username, a thumbnail URL, an image URL, okay? You have how many likes the post has, the timestamp for the post, and an array of comments for each post, okay? So this is kind of how this whole thing is set up. And these images may or may not look the same as this, right? It may not look exactly like this, but there'll be images that are of high quality that are pulled from Instagram already and saved on our own server, okay? So you should have those URLs. They should be pointing live. If the server goes down, let me know. If you start getting like a bunch of 404s on your URLs, let me know, okay? So yeah, just make sure you're very well aware of what you are trying to build today. So read through all of the tasks before you even start writing code. Okay, read through the entire documentation today before you start writing code. But I just want you to keep this in your mind, that the focus for today is 100% around creating a React application from scratch, setting it up, getting your files structured and organized the way that you need to, and then as you're passing around data, make sure that the data that you're passing around is type-checked with PropTypes. Okay? So that being said, that being your focus, I'm wondering how confident you're feeling on a scale of 1 to 5 that is something you feel confident and excited and you accept the challenge to work on this afternoon. So a 1 would be, today's conversation was completely lost on me and I have no confidence at all. A 3 would be, I'm confident, I'm ready to jump in. And a 5 would be, I'm overconfident and maybe need to check my ego at the door. No, I'm just kidding. A 5 would be, I'm certain that I can get to MVP today. Okay. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to keep an eye on that poll. I'll ask PMs to check in and reach out through the day and just check on those who are feeling like a 2. If you're feeling like a 2, just let your PM know. And we can make sure that you get this progress, at least the first few steps put together so you have a good place to start. So remember, each day we work a little bit more out of the same directory. You go and you fork and clone it, and you start by creating everything that you need to create. Okay? Thanks for tuning in, CS12. I hope everything goes as smoothly as possible for all of you. Let us know if you have any issues, and we will solve them right away. We'll talk to you soon.